ChatGPT loses a feature, and Google searches get even less private. This is MacVoices. MacVoices is supported by Squarespace. Get online, build your site, promote your brand, and get paid all in one place at squarespace.com/MacVoices. Use the offer code MacVoices for 10% off your first website or domain purchase. MacVoices is supported by MacPaw, the makers of Clean My Mac, your ultimate solution for Mac control and care. Try Clean My Mac for 7 days free, then use the code MacVoices20 for 20% off at cleanmy.com/MacVoices. That's CLNMY.com/MacVoices. So jumping over to a little bit more Apple-focused news, as if the Italian one wasn't. ChatGPT's voice feature is going away on macOS, at least for the moment. And I say for the moment because there's no indication that they're saying they would bring it back or this is a temporary thing. I would be shocked if it didn't come back because it's still being it's going to be available on your iPhone or iPad, and as I understand it, on the web version too. But is this a big deal? Yeah, sorry guys. Is this a big deal, or do any of you use the voice mode, and specifically on your Mac? Marty?
Yeah, ironically, just this last week, I had it use the voice mode for ChatGPT, and it worked really well. And now you send this article, it says they're going to pull it away. It really looks, and from the article, it says they're just trying to unify their voice platform. You know, we've gotten a recent release of a new macOS software. Could be that that's part of the reason they're pulling it back to make readjustments with that. But yeah, I like using it. And as the article also says, that people are going to be interacting with AI with voice more so than with text or typing.
Okay. So, Marty, you did find it to be a positive experience.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it worked well.
Yeah, that's the way I found it, but nice to hear somebody validate it. Brian?
Yeah, I've used the voice mode a little bit. I found it most useful on the phone when I go for a long walk. And sometimes it's just good to flush out ideas and to run things back and forth and that type of thing. I found it pretty useful. I haven't found as much use on the Mac app, but with regards to the comment about whether or not this is a feature that'll be back soon enough, it seems like it might be. There was a quote somewhere in the article that was talking about how it's something about rebuilding its architecture. Maybe it has to do with using maybe a similar developer language or something to unify and make it easier for updates down the road. So, but yeah, I found the feature useful.
Yeah. David?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't use it too much. I mean, I used voice control, for other tools like using it with the S Lady or using it on other things. It just popped up on me the other day. I noticed that, and I kind of forgot about it. I did try it for a little bit, but when I did try it, it is very helpful. I mean, I definitely agree with that. I don't know. I've gotten so used to an AI typing things in because I'm just so wanting to get the answer and just keep thinking as I type. But I keep forgetting that voice control is voice chat is more helpful sometimes and much easier. But yeah, I'm curious why it happened, and I'm hoping that it comes back.
Yeah, and maybe again, I don't think this is necessarily clickbait. It just makes me wonder why it was first on macOS that they decided to do this. If they just said across the board it was going away, then you would think, all right, it makes sense. Yeah. But what is it specifically about the macOS that caused them to remove it? Because I'm like you, and we've talked now for probably years.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, about the idea that, we all want, we all want the Star Trek Enterprise computer where we can have a conversation with it. And the ChatGPT voice mode is kind of like that. It's a little more. It's even a little more conversational than that, because it does seem to have a personality, if you will. But to say that they're going to drop this off right now is surprising.
I'm not going to let you say anything bad about my girlfriend, Chuck.
Okay.
That's all I'll say.
Yeah, I saw this. I first heard this on Ken Ray's macOS Ken a couple days ago. And it occurred to me that maybe this panel knows, maybe it doesn't, but about 2 weeks ago, Sam Altman declared a code red at OpenAI, apparently in response to Google and the quality of their just released Gemini model. And apparently he's just slashing all sorts of stuff and focusing people to get back onto improving the quality and utility of their underlying model. So I suspect this is probably a casualty in that, given Apple and their App Store policies, maybe, and I'm speculating here, maybe that was just enough friction for them to decide, screw it, let's just stop it. Because from what I heard, they didn't say that they were going to, nullify it or stop it. It's just that, don't count on enhancements going forward.
I honestly hadn't thought about the any relationship between the code red and the suspension of this feature. So that's a really interesting point, and how it fits in or might not fit in, I don't know. But at least we still have it on the iOS app and the website. Joe in the chat room says AI through DuckDuckGo seems to be pretty reliable. Siri voice AI is questionable with the S lady's poor track record. All my devices just lit up when I said her name. Sorry.
Worst by Janae Ico now playing.
All right. Cancel. Hey Siri, cancel. Boy, my fault. I'm just having my own little conversation over here, guys. Feel free to jump in anytime. So there is a new, I guess you would call it agency, the new government tech force. And Apple apparently is going to be contributing to this. And I am curious as to what you think about this. From what I've read, and if I understand it correctly, it's going to be like taking a sabbatical from your company. Apple's providing people, Google's providing people. I think even Meta's providing people to this to help give some technical expertise to the federal government. This sort of came out of nowhere as far as I was concerned. I hadn't seen anything about this. Was anybody aware of this at all? No?
Nothing surprises me anymore. So
Yeah.
I was too worried about Space Force. Now I got to worry about Tech Force.
I mean, I don't see this as a bad thing, especially if they're tapping people from some of the established organizations. So I guess we want to hear more about it. So, Mark.
Yeah, I heard a little bit about this on another podcast, I think middle or end of last week. Reading more about it, on the surface, it sounds good because maybe there are really great senior level people who are looking for a couple year sabbatical or to redirect their career. But I think for a lot of nuts and bolts qualified developers, maybe I'm just too challenged in terms of imagination, but I just don't see companies wanting to let them go out for 2 years to serve in the federal government. So I'm cynically thinking that instead of performance improvement plans and companies trimming or laying off their underperforming 5 or 10%, they may just send them off to the government in this plan. And that's maybe not necessarily a bad thing, because a lot of riffs and the like sometimes it's skill based, sometimes it's just a poor fit, and they may be better placed and with their skills in the federal government, because face it, Google or Apple or Meta or Microsoft or somebody wouldn't hire somebody if they didn't on the face of it have skills requisite to do the job. The fact that they may not succeed in the job is maybe it's the hiring manager or the fit with the team, and there's all sorts of other soft interpersonal factors. But this may be a way to help the government, and helps and be a new path for somebody who got into an environment that was maybe not right for him or her.
Eric?
Yeah, this doesn't really have a good feel for me. I'm not getting an indication of really a good definition of what they're trying to accomplish. I don't see any indication of oversight. This, for all we know, this is just a way of sending in a bunch of marketing people to encourage use of whatever variant of AI each one of these companies has, implemented in a way that may or may not have benefit to taxpayers at whatever costs. And then, is it going to be tested? Is privacy and security going to be adequate? Where's the data going to be stored? Each company's people know their company's products, but when you try to interact and make it all work together, I don't see who is looking after the interests of the taxpayer in this way of implementing it.
I think all those are very fair points. I also think at least this particular article was the very first time I'd heard about the tech force. So I don't know where it's coming from. I do think that there needs to be a lot more information. Sort of along the lines of what Mark said, though, I'm encouraged a little bit, even though we don't know how people are being selected, whether Apple is sending people or whether they're asking for people from Apple or what. But they're just not going out there and hiring anyone. At least the people will have some kind of tech cred because they're working for some of the organizations. So I'm willing to give them that much. But I agree with you on the oversight and exactly what the objectives are here. On the other hand, will this help feed an intelligent response to some of what the earlier story said about pushing back against some of the EU examinations and fines and debates and all that? So I feel like the jury's out, but it's also important that they know. Marty,
Eric, government oversight. Why start now? I think this is an opportunity for people. It's a consideration. They can sign up for it. 2 years out of their job, getting paid between 150 and 200K plus benefits. In the government sector. So I guess this is government undosing itself, really. Now starting to build up support for the kind of work that needs to be done. So I don't know. I think it's a job opportunity for folks that want that opportunity. And according to the article, they can go back after 2 years. The company can invite them back to their jobs, but who knows? The market with employees, every week we hear stories of this tech company losing this group, that tech. This at least seems like stable employment for 2 years.
I would argue that Doge was the first implementation of this strategy, and I don't think it worked well.
Oh, yeah.
And this is just doing it again and again and again with more people. I still don't see it working well. Now, if the goal is just to splatter AI everywhere and not care about who has data where or what, or analyzing it or figuring out if you're spending money wisely, have at it. I think they're going to send in people who are really talented, because each company stands to win out over time if they can build a dependency on each of their different products. I just don't see anyone looking after the overall long-term interests of the taxpayers. That's why I question the lack of oversight.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair point. Eric, it's funny. I'm not sure. I guess I need you to define interest of taxpayers. As I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're talking about the financial aspect of it.
It's financial. It's also privacy. If you say, "Hey, I'm really talented, and I could put AI into all of the tax forms, so that whenever you do anything, it sucks all of your work history and everything else into Google's system and hands it off to Palantir and SAP, and hands back a form that says, yep, all your tax forms are filled out. It's great. It's wonderful. It might even look good, but does Google then have all your data because it bounced through one of their systems? Does anyone else have it? And then what happens 2 years down the line when you need to do maintenance? You had the best talent possible coming in from one of these AI companies and building a product that nobody left in government understands how to manage, maintain, and upgrade. Now you have to go back with market rate contracts to try to get somebody to come in to add the newest model or fix it if there's some weird bias that causes inaccurate data. And who's going to check for accuracy? Or are we just going to assume that everybody's taxes will be paid correctly because it's AI, it must be right?
Well, I think your concerns are very well said, but I also think they are reflective of what we see in private industry right now as well, and government too. That everybody is sort of jumping in and attacking this stuff, and there's not a lot of long-term thinking, because everybody's concerned that if they don't take the short-term gains or work on the short-term gains, that they're going to be really left in the dust.
Well, and I don't argue against the companies, right? They're doing what they're supposed to be doing. That's why I keep going back to the whole oversight. I mean, when they came out with tax forms that were free for everybody, and then TurboTax came back and said, nope, we don't like that, made a couple donations, and all of a sudden all of the work that was done to try to make tax forms easier and have a free way of filling out the forms, that all got thrown out because somebody disagreed with it. Yeah, maybe you can rework that in AI, but no one is really looking after the interests of taxpayers that don't have enough money to be able to go someplace and get a second opinion. And it's other industries as well. AI, is AI in a prison system good? Does all that data get shared? What about doctors? Let's say you want to file something for psychiatric care. Is it really good that a whole pile of contractors figure out whether or not you get approved and what gets stored, and does that data get handed off to 12 other companies and then affects your future somehow? Maybe you can't get a job because all of your medical data is all sitting in a couple of AI systems that another company can reach in and look at. Look at all the stuff with Facebook leaking data over in Britain that everybody got upset about. Now we're thinking of paying a whole pile of companies to implement it right in front of everybody. Is the best interest of each of these companies in the best interests of individual citizens in the country.
Okay. I think every one of your questions is absolutely valid, and I don't think any of us have any answers. My big question, though, to the group is, are we being a little bit curmudgeonly here? Are we fighting the future? Because there would be some obvious benefits to having a lot of information shared. There are equally obvious reasons you don't want things shared. But is this something that is inevitable? Whether it's tech force or whether it's just the expansion of AI or whatever. Should we be asking, pardon me, should we be not necessarily embracing this, but maybe asking some of Eric's questions with an eye toward helping it happen in the right way? Mark?
We don't know. We've just heard of this program. Eric has a lot of valid concerns. What percent of them, are attached to this program? We don't know. So this is a work in progress. And I would point out, I don't think this is any different than past government IT oversight. And maybe, as Jim could point out, here in California, we have decades and decades of IT government projects that just spend money and flush it down the toilet. So why should we expect anything different at the federal level?
Well,
But maybe
actually, the U.S. government had a special department for, digital, I forget the name of it, U.S. Digital Services or something like that, that was founded, I think, back in the Obama era.
And that became Doge.
And that was Doge, yeah. So
It was a
this
teeny
was
tiny
done,
little thing that became Doge.
but it wasn't that small, and by all accounts, it was very successful.
Yeah, I think they're very valid questions. And, folks, if you have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear them, because we certainly don't have all the answers. We barely have all the questions.
Well, the other question is, who would normally be asking all of those questions? Normally, there would be Senate hearings or there would be House hearings, and they'd be bringing in experts from all of these different companies, and you'd have somebody leading the group that was approved by the Senate. And if there were questions, there would be more hearings. If all of those structures disappear, that's why I have the questions I have. Not that I don't think something like this couldn't be a really cool idea. That mix between private industry and government and, universities and industry, that's always worked really well. But when you start throwing it all out or saying, half of the technology people in this country shouldn't be here, and we're going to, send them to Canada or to Europe and not benefit from their knowledge, I think that's a problem. Yeah, I've harped enough.
No, Eric, it's all those points are well taken, and they're things that we need to be aware of, and sort of maybe even reminded of that's how the process has worked in the past. We'll see how it works in the future. Today's Mac Voices is supported by Clean My Mac from MacPaw. We all know that most New Year's resolutions last about a week, 2 weeks tops. But here's a resolution that is both important and easy to keep. Make your Mac run better all year long with Clean My Mac. Over time, every Mac slows down, not because it's old, but because it quietly collects clutter, leftover files, and digital debris you never asked for. Clean My Mac gives you back control. It's notarized by Apple and built by MacPaw, so it's designed to work with macOS, not against it. One of the best parts is that Clean My Mac puts everything in one place. You open it, and SmartCare shows you what's stealing performance right now, system junk, outdated files, or background issues, and fixes them with a click. No hunting through folders or guessing what's safe to delete. And it doesn't stop with your Mac. With Cloud Cleanup, Clean My Mac scans your iCloud, OneDrive, and Google Drive to uncover massive files you forgot about, even ones still syncing in the background, all while keeping everything processed locally on your Mac for privacy. Add in the Moonlock anti-malware engine, and you get protection that quietly blocks threats before they ever become a problem. So if you're looking for a resolution that takes about 5 minutes and pays off all year, this is it. Get tidy today. Try 7 days free and use my code, MacVoices20 in all caps, for 20% off at cleanmy.com/MacVoices, also in all caps. That's clnmy.com/MacVoices and the code MacVoices20, both in all caps, for 20% off. Thanks to Clean My Mac for supporting MacVoices. Today's MacVoices is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one website platform designed to get you online quickly and easily with a set of powerful and flexible tools to look professional, grow your brand, and get paid, all in one place. One of the biggest challenges for creators today isn't making great content. It's making sure people can actually find it. That's where Squarespace's built-in SEO tools really shine. Every site is automatically optimized with clean URLs, meta descriptions, and sitemaps, so your videos, show notes, and pages get indexed properly and show up in search results without you needing to be an SEO expert. And when it comes to publishing, Squarespace makes it incredibly easy. You can upload and organize your videos, build beautiful video libraries, and even monetize premium content with a paywall. Perfect for courses, behind-the-scenes footage, or exclusive episodes. Everything lives right on your site under your brand instead of being buried inside a third-party platform. On top of that, Squarespace's cutting-edge design tools let you showcase your work the way it deserves. With Blueprint AI and their award-winning templates, you can launch a site that looks custom-built in minutes, then fine-tune it with drag-and-drop layouts, animations, and styling that matches your brand. If you're serious about growing an audience, ranking in search, and presenting your video content the right way, Squarespace gives you the tools to do it all in one place. If you're ready to build something that looks great and works even better, go to squarespace.com/MacVoices for a free trial. And when you're ready to launch, use the offer code MacVoices to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. That's squarespace.com/MacVoices for a free trial and the offer code MacVoices for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thanks to Squarespace for supporting MacVoices. I need to call out the next one on my own home state because this was extremely disappointing. A PA High Court rules that police can access Google searches without a warrant. And I am not sure that I'm happy about this because the logic seems to be that, if I can paraphrase it well, that Google searches are so prevalent now and so easy to do that the government doesn't need a warrant to go in and ask Google for information. And I think that is an extremely simplistic way to look at this, at the world of search and the availability of information on Google. I think it's a lot different to do a Google search on Marty Jencius versus asking Google for all the details on what Marty has searched for.
But read this article. That's not what they did. They didn't ask what Marty Jencius searched for. They asked, tell us anyone who searched for a particular address. So it wasn't a search of a person's Google search history. It was look at everyone's search history in the world and tell us who searched for this particular thing.
And in this case, it looks like it yielded the kind of information they wanted, and they caught the responsible party. But
well, sure,
but I don't feel like that makes it right. And I mean, we just finished talking about privacy and oversight and all that, and this really erodes that.
Well, the requirement for warrants isn't because it's because doing these things that require warrants, they work well. They are good tools but they violate people's rights. So, I'm with you. This is really bad. Yeah.
Mark?
I may have a congenital defect being related to lawyers and having worked with lawyers in my career. So having said that, I would point out that there is a difference between a warrant and a subpoena. And this article seems to me like, it's getting too wrapped up on requiring a warrant, because the difference is a subpoena, somebody, a DA or a police captain can say, give us this information. A warrant can actually compel you and authorize the government to go in and, search your house, search your computer, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I, I think that, well, I don't know. I mean, for whatever reason, it seems like this article is focusing on warrants when, from the research I had done, I spent about 30 minutes, exploring this topic. A lot of governments get electronic records with a subpoena. They basically say, "Hey, Google," or hey, ASP, ISP, AT&T, whomever, we want this information on this sort of person." So, and then these organizations just comply. I think that what we're seeing here is, remember 10, 12, 15 years ago, there was a case that went before the Supreme Court on whether police would be able to insert a tracking device in somebody's vehicle and track them. And ultimately, the Supreme Court, because they were arguing, well, they're driving around, that's public information. They don't have any expectation of privacy by, driving, from, A to B. But in that case, the Supreme Court ruled that no, that, it actually was, a trespass on premises, the premises being the vehicle. And, they rebutted it on Fourth Amendment grounds. I think this case smells like it's absolutely ripe, to mature in a couple of years, to get up to the Supreme Court over just how private are your searches. And I think Jim made an interesting point: is this targeted for, to go after, Chuck Joyner because we think he did something bad? That requires, under existing court cases, that requires a search warrant. To go out and say, "Hey, Google, tell us everybody who searched for this thing," that's anonymous. It's sort of like a couple of years ago, there was, that serial killer in California who got identified because, they found, his blood type. They found a relative and they contacted the relative and they worked through, through a family tree and found and convicted the killer. I think this sort of focusing on searches is sort of like that, and that is where is the boundary line between what is anonymized, aggregated public data versus something that's targeting a particular person. So I think that needs to be figured out. I think the other thing there that it would comment on, because it seems like the judge in his or her opinion was saying, well, it states there in the Google terms of service that they sell all this, that, and the other thing, and people know that companies sell this stuff. Well, to me, that's a lot of hand waving, because I don't think a lot of people actually really read and understand what's in the terms of service. So it's an open issue, I think, of how valid is that they just click through. I want to use this program, just click yes. And I didn't understand that I was giving them the ability that they could have law enforcement come in and get this stuff. Sam Altman at a Senate hearing a couple months ago made a similar point, where I think this is in relation to New York Times wanting a lot of chats and prompts, which is, I guess, their term of art for search engine queries. And he was saying, no, we can't. We have a lot of very personal, private information about people. So I think this is going to be maybe the touchstone, the catalyst for some really interesting lawsuits to help clarify these things, because we're basically in no man's land. And again, I point out that it seemed to me, by focusing and saying, oh, they can do this without a warrant, well, to get a subpoena, also does require some sort of judicial action, and depending on the jurisdiction, it may or may not require a judge. Clearly, a search warrant, where the government can actually go in and break into your home and seize stuff. That requires a probable cause, which is very higher legal standard than a subpoena, which is, well, just show us the stuff that's of interest to this particular case. So pardon me if I'm going down a rat hole, but I thought this was very interesting, and I hope, since you live in Pennsylvania, Chuck, that if there's other developments to this, that you bring the stories here for us to read and talk and think about.
Yeah, it bothered me a lot. Now I'll tell you, while you were talking, Mark, I typed into Google, tell me everyone who has searched for turkey recipe in the last hour. Google said, I cannot provide a list of specific individuals who've searched for turkey recipes in the last hour. Search engines like Google, Bing, and DuckDuckGo do not make individual user search histories public due to strict privacy policies and data protection regulations. Okay, that's great, because, there's a little protection there. This was interesting, though. However, based on recent trends, here's what I can tell you about who is likely searching for this right now. Geographic hotspots, specifically in areas like Presque Isle, Maine, and Alpena, I hope I said that right, Michigan. Yeah. Trending methods, current searches are heavily focused on smoking a turkey, followed by spatchcock, flattening the bird for faster cooking, and air fryer turkey breast.
You didn't identify yourself as coming from Pennsylvania. You would have gotten all the data you wanted.
Now that's
he's not law enforcement.
Yeah, but so it's interesting that okay, now I will keep this in mind about ways to track trends or whatever, and it is giving me some information. So, Eric, I wanted to make sure you get your point in.
Oh yeah, I guess there's a difference between collecting anonymous data or anonymized data so that you can't identify somebody, and handing back information. So if you said, hey, how many people searched for an address, maybe even how many people searched for an address by state, you're probably fine. It's different from saying, give me the name of every single person who searched for that address, along with enough information to know, their address or whatever. That's totally different. It's kind of like saying, hey, if you are listing information about treatment or a disease, and there's somebody in the list that's greater than 90 years old, that's not anonymous either, and it's a problem. So I think sometimes rulings are made, decisions are made that aren't taking into account what parts of information. It's not like this judge was necessarily an expert in data. That's why for medical records, you've got specialists that look at, well, is this data really anonymous or not? And I worry that law is always behind technology. It's just getting more complicated now. And so I guess I tend to worry a lot more about making a bunch of data available, especially when it attaches single person identifiable information or single household or whatever. I think that's dangerous.
Without some oversight.
I think it's dangerous with or without oversight.
Yeah, that's true. Right? That's true. Yeah. But at least with oversight, there's somebody that is hopefully somebody with some level of responsibility who is looking at it and saying, hey, why do you need this? I mean, like a judge, you can't just go and ask for, something. You have to give some decent reason for it.
Yeah. Well, as an example, right? So if they're saying anybody who does a search with Google, they should know that none of their data is private and it could be handed over to police at any time because they asked. That's simplifying it, but for now. So what happens if you take a private browser working in anonymous mode and you make a query to an AI who then in the background runs a query to Google. You certainly intended it to be private. Is it now not private because somehow it touched Google?
When phone taps were first invented, didn't the police try to say, well, we're doing this tap at the telephone company's office, so we're not trespassing on your privacy. You have no expectation of privacy because this signal is going down this public thing, and that was their, and eventually the courts are like, no, people have an expectation of privacy, even though we have an expectation that our mail doesn't get opened at the post office, and things like that. And to me, this seems like the exact same thing. And in this case, it's sort of like, oh, well, good, we caught a killer. But, what if some policeman decided to, ask Google for information that's going to find some information about his ex-wife or something? It's just basically anybody that happens to be employed by a police department has carte blanche to access whatever Google has.
That's
Before
what
we go on with this,
Jim, that's what this whole lawsuit is about. So we'll have to.
Well, and that's
see
what
how
the
it works
court is
itself
saying.
out.
The court is saying, yeah, if you're employed by a police department,
well, that's the court in one state. If we have a ruling in another state that says no, bingo, you have a case that immediately, subject to time delays, can get escalated to the Supreme Court.
And we know that ruling will be wise.
Yeah.
Hey, on that note, I know, Mark, you have a heart out, and I want to make sure to say thank you. Happy holidays. Where can folks find you?
At X or at LinkedIn, Mark Fuccio, MarkFuccio. Great.
Merry Christmas.
Chuck, David, everybody, Webb, Jim, Eric, Marty, have a Merry Christmas if you celebrate it, and have a Happy New Year, which I'm sure you all do. So we'll see you again.
Take care.
Mark, be good. Miss you, brother.
Well, or good or not. Naughty or nice. No, there's a naughty or nice comment in there somewhere. Brian?
Oh, yeah. I was just going to comment that when I was reading this article, it made me think of some of the parallels between the Patriot Act and how the government was able to go in and take a look at your library records and to be able to see what books you may check out, and just kind of look at the parallels of the time where how often people may use or not use a library nowadays to check out a book or whatnot when they're researching a topic. In some ways, it's almost even more concerning, I think. There's a quote towards the bottom of the article that, and maybe it's a little extreme on their side, of course, because of the way that they're writing the article, but it says the danger of a reverse keyword search is that it allows the police to rummage through our digital questions and queries, and thus in inference our minds. A list of your questions to Google is a direct link to your thinking. And so I mean, pretty extreme view, of course, but interesting nonetheless.
Yeah. We spend so much time talking about privacy, security, all these things, but I think they are issues that really need to be thought about, because what I'm comfortable with and what I think is right may not agree with some of the other members of the panel, and I love that, because then we can debate it and discuss it, and hopefully all become a little wiser, or not. Visit macvoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices, or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CashFly at cashfly.com.